Okay, we are starting chapter 45. This is a continuum of the last couple of chapters, as indicated by the first word, which says ode, and, or again, or more. Now, curiously, as you'll just take a glance, this is a very short chapter, in contrast to the previous two chapters, which were very long. Now, you can't always judge a book by its cover or a chapter's content simply by its length, but there is, I think, a message here, especially in the Alter Rebbe's whole strategy of the long, short way. And the previous two chapters speak about how one achieves first what we call reverence, pachad, yira for Hashem, fear, not fear of punishment, as we talked about, but fear of separation. The next chapter, the previous chapter, spoke about love, how we achieve a more than just our instinctual drive to be connected with the infinity of Hashem. And that takes a long time. Those are long, short ways. They're much more sophisticated, developed, thorough characterizations or character traits, better, of how one promotes this through the intellect to transform the heart. That is, our goal is to do more than just what comes instinctually. And that requires engaging our capacity to imagine the infinite, something greater than just myself. This is that crucial idea. It's more than just what I like and see and touch and feel in the moment. And from there, we are able to bring ourselves to, again, be fearful of separation from Hashem and desirous of connection with Hashem. This is our standard process, which we have been discussing the last couple of chapters. This chapter, which again, as you note, is a short chapter, is based on, now that we have this idea, again, the long, short way. Hopefully everyone remembers this is on the title page of Tanya. It's a quote from the Talmud about the long way to get you, and then short once you master it. So in a sense, there's a long, short way, micro here. The long way is to develop the two primary emotional characteristics: love, which drives me to be closer to Hashem; fear, which prevents me from being distant from Hashem. Love, you should love the Lord your God, drives me to do the mitzvahs. Fear restrains me from violating the prohibitions. This dynamic is the essence. Like we talk about, the first commandment, I am Hashem your God, I want to be close with you. The second commandment is you shall have no other gods. I fear being separated from Hashem. All the obligatory commandments are driven by my desire, my love for Hashem. All the prohibitive commandments, I restrain myself because of my fear of being separated from Hashem. And now that we have these ideas, and hopefully we've even accomplished them, we now are empowered for another level, which is to serve Hashem lishma, for the sake of God. Now, if we were to summarize all of Chassidus in one phrase, we might, hear me better with my microphone, we might use the term, it's not about me. It's not about me. Torah life is not about what's in for me. It's not about what I like. It's not about what works for me. It's not about my microphone being caught on the wire. It's not about me. It's about fulfilling Hashem's purpose. Hashem created the world for a purpose, and we participate. Now, even love of Hashem and fear of Hashem can, at a very subtle level, contain a whisper of self. I love God. It's even true with people. You know, if a child tells their parent, I love you, are they really talking about the parent, or are they talking about myself? I mean, I'm a good child. I love my parents. I love my children. I love my grandchildren. I love people. This is a little bit about me. Even I am fearful of being separated and detached is a little bit about me. So although these are very lofty levels, they still carry a slight whisper of self. There is another level which we are going to aspire to, now that we've at least are aware and maybe even have touched upon these levels, called the service of Hashem lishma. Now, lishma, how do you translate it? It's very hard because there is no concept in English, in a secular language, of this characteristic of doing something without any sense of self. The closest thing we have is probably parenting. That's probably the closest thing that we have. But even then, again, anything is subject to being manipulated by self-interest, but it's probably the closest level. It means to serve Hashem only for the name. Hashem lishma, for the name. And even thought produced, when we say thought, again, we mean beginning with the presumption that there's more to life than just myself, that infinite level of chachma that produces love of Hashem and fear of Hashem is still not necessarily, it's still potentially somewhat stained by self. And therefore, if I had if I had a situation of Mesiras Nefesh, I may not be ready for it. That's the ultimate test. I love Hashem. I love Hashem. Well, what if my love of Hashem will not get me close to Hashem? Hashem will get the love, but I won't get what I'm looking for. Meaning, do I have the capacity to share love, even if I don't get that love back? Which is, again, a test case for the threshold of limitation in my love. So lishma means that there is no limitation to it. There isn't any hold back to my level of love. It is purely for Hashem. Now, lishma means I do it for God, not because I'm Orthodox and not because it makes me feel good or holy or kind. Simply for Hashem. It doesn't matter what Hashem has asked, whether he's asked me to do something I agree with, I find meaningful, it inspires me, really resonates with me, or it sounds completely bizarre. It's not about whether I like it. I'm doing it only for Hashem. The ultimate, it's not about me. What matters is who is asked. Hashem is asked. Love is doing for the other one simply because of who they are. Now, again, hopefully at every chapter and every line, we say this is the whole essence of all of Tanya, which is this sort of top-down idea, meaning there's two ways, or two possible ways, maybe there are more, that we could view Torah's message for our character. Meaning, we look at the same thing, law. I mean, there's all kinds of schools of thought in law. What is the primary objective of law? Is it the protection of the public, or is it the protection of the individual? You could have all kinds of discussions. The same thing is true with character. Now, every community in Torah works on character. Nobody says, well, we don't care about character. All we care about is keep the chicken soup out of the cereal bowl, return lost items, light the Hanukkah candles on time. Everybody cares about character. But there's two of the ways that we can view how Torah instructs us in character. One is, I decide what are virtuous characteristics: kindness, generosity, punctuality, friendship. And then I look for Torah and say, where does Torah teach me how to do those things? Or I look to Torah and say, what are Torah's values? And then those become my values. Because look, just between us, maybe there's some values of Torah that seem mean, or they seem very intolerant, and they're not very accepting. And they don't just say, well, hey, I'm okay, you're okay. So the question becomes, are my values? And then I look for whether Torah can inform me as to how best to effectuate what I think is valuable. Or do I say, Hashem associates himself with the seven spheres, and therefore I will associate myself with them. The structure of Hasidus, as it teaches us how we develop our relationship with Hashem, is beginning with the presumption that our premise, our value is what Hashem values. Not that I have values. Now, what does Hashem have to tell? I like kindness. Oh, look, that's meaningful to me. That really resonates with me. Now, I'm not against that. But if that's the arbiter of whether or not I do it, what's going to happen tomorrow when it doesn't resonate with me, when I don't like it? When Hashem tells me to do something and it's inconvenient, or I even think it's immoral. I don't think we should fill in the blank, tell people not to wear woolen linen, even though they spent a lot of money on that coat and they can't return it. I think we should be tolerant and let them drive to shul on Saturday to their grandson's bar mitzvah. I mean, it's kind of harsh. You're not going to let her drive to her grandson's bar mitzvah? Don't you know she's a Holocaust survivor? As I tell people, I let you do whatever, I don't care, but God cares. That's where these issues become difficult. So what we're going to talk about in this chapter is not I love Hashem, is what is it that Hashem wants, and am I willing, which is hard, am I willing to make Hashem's values my values? Now, our favorite, or my favorite illustration is, are you Jewish? Yes. You want to shake the lulav and esrog. That's what you want to do. The guy says, I don't want to do that. I want to go about my day. Yeah, but you have a neshama that is contained within you, that is crying out and saying, please, please, put on tefillin. It will be so meaningful to me. And one of the core strategies that the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about in this chapter for us to achieve Lishma is to, how do I define I? And am I willing to have compassion on my neshama and say, I will put aside what I want for my neshama? Will I have basic human compassion? I don't want to do it. I don't want to pick up that person's wallet and say, excuse me, you dropped your wallet. I don't want to go and grab that kid and stop them from putting their hand on the stove. I'm busy doing what I'm doing. But am I aware of other people? Am I conscious of others? And because I always have to have the Lubavitch commercial, we'll share one insight from the Rebbe in behavior. So a man, his name is Ari Goldman. He used to be a reporter for the New York Times when that used to be fancy schmancy. Now we don't even know what the newspaper is. And he's smart enough to have left that and become a professor of journalism so he can teach other kids who won't be able to find jobs. And he's a Shomer Shabbos guy, and he was always given, the Jewish assignment. So he met with the Rebbe on numerous occasions in his context as a reporter for the New York Times, when that meant something. And they asked him, what is your impression? So he said, in my position, I have met many prominent people. And some of them are very generous with their time, and some of them are not. And some of them are very kind, and some of them are snooty, and some of them give you the time of day, and some don't. But none of them ever demonstrated that they were all that interested in you, except the Rebbe. When I would come to the Rebbe would always ask me, what's your name, and where are you from, and what are you doing, and what's your family? So all of a sudden, the Rebbe turned it around. He was interested in me. Last year, when they had this week-long Fabrengen during the lockdown, they had this man on. He was a podiatrist. He was some fancy schmancy podiatrist from New Jersey. And when the Rebbe had some issues with his feet, some doctor who knew him called him up, and he said, I have this very important patient. You must make time for him. Okay, if you say so. Tell him to come in on Tuesday. You understand? You have to go to him in Brooklyn. What? I don't go to him. I'm the biggest big shot. They said, I'm telling you, you have to go to him. So the guy was like, okay, if he's such a big shot, I'll go to him. If he's a bigger big shot than I am. So he comes, he walks in, he's a Jewish guy from New Jersey, but this is totally out of his element. And he's got his doctor bag, and he's ushered in like he's the king. And they tell him, we'll bring you into the Rebbe. So he's a little bit, intimidated. He's starting to get a feel that this is something very special. He walks in, and the first thing the Rebbe says to him is, what's your name? And where are you from? And where's your family? He's like, what do you mean? I thought you're such a big shot that I have to leave my office and drive here. Nobody, they're always on the phone, and they have no time, and they're talking to this one and that one. And, it made an incredible impression. He tells a story. I'm not sharing any secrets, and he starts tearing up. I mean, he was a very not involved Jew, and this led him, and he's retired now. He lives in Arizona. He's involved with Chabad in Sedona. And he tells this story. I mean, it's remarkable. So this is the point that the Alter Rebbe is illustrating in this chapter. Basically, he appeals to your basic sense of compassion. Will you have simple human rachmanis on your poor neshama that's trapped in your body, that wants to eat and sleep, and it needs this and that, and your neshama is crying out and saying, "Shake the lulav and esrog, I don't know, and I'm busy, and I don't have time, and I'm etc." Have basic compassion. That's why it's a short chapter. This is a short path. Just like we talked about in the beginning of Tanya, in the first 17 chapters, about developing the intellect to rule the heart. And then in chapter 18, the Alter Rebbe said, well, there is this kind of a shortcut to just gin up the emotion. This is also a form of a shortcut, like a shock to the basic emotional compassion system, which is, Pashat have rachmanas on your neshama that's stuck in your goofy goof. So here the Alter Rebbe says, Oid, there is another, Yesh Derech Yasher, a straight path. So again, the Alter Rebbe is very careful to not diminish our behaviors by calling it a gimmick, but at the same time, and again, we use this term in context, a little gimmicky, because it's not necessarily long-term sustainable, but it is a certain quality, and that's why it's considered straight. When the previous levels of engaging the imagination to gin up the love or that fear, and again, fear meaning the fear of separation, but it's derech yashar, it's straight, it's available to everybody. You may recognize that the first mission in the second chapter of Pirkei Avos asks the question, derech yashar sheyavar lo ha'adam, which translates as, what is the straight path that a person should choose? So we ask, what would it mean? Do Torah mitzvahs. Doesn't know we understand that. But what is it sort of beyond just the mechanical function? And the answer, it says, is all that brings glory to the Creator and glory to others, or beauty to the Creator and beauty to others. But it's everybody can do this. Maybe, again, like we talked about with the mind rules the heart. Yes, it's within everyone's capacity, but it's very difficult. This more straight path that I simply have human compassion on my poor neshama is accessible to everybody. And it's again, lifnei ish. This is an ish. Ish is about the intellect. I'm sorry, ish is about the character. Adam is about the intellect. We just had it in the parsha. It's always referring to this ish who takes them in and out. And the ish told us that we had to bring our brother down. And the ish, it describes the character more than it does the intellect. It's not the Adam level. La'asaik b'Torah mitzvahs, and here's the key word, lishman. It's lishma. The Tzemach Tzedek, the third Rebbe, offered an analogy. He said, look, every parent feeds his children. Even a bird feeds its children, nothing against birds. In fact, if a parent doesn't support their child, we can obligate them, even if they're over bar mitzvah, and technically they're adults. We have communal shaming, and we say that. What's the difference? And again, this is that quality that a parent knows. Do I parent my child because, hey, well, this is my kid, and this kid's going to choose my nursing home, so I better be nice to them? Or is it born purely out of love? It's a remarkable thing. Why do you love this kid? He doesn't even pay rent. This kid doesn't do anything but cry and just cost you money. Because that is a love that is not about anything that's in it for me. So too, to do Torah mitzvahs lishma. How can I do Torah mitzvahs lishma? I like it. Does my liking it, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Of course, the answer is it depends. Is it that I do it because it's, why is Shabbos meaningful to you? Well, it's a very tricky question, because if I tell you, I say, well, I got a more meaningful thing to do. Why do you have to do it on Friday night and Shabbos? Why can't you do it on Monday night and Tuesday, etc.? If I do it because this is what Hashem wants, the answer, why do I do a mitzvah? It's what Hashem asked me to do. That's lishma. How do I generate this quality of lishma? So the Alter Rebbe says, which is through Yaakov. Now, where do we find that Yaakov has this quality? So let's back up a little. Yaakov, it's not a competition, and it's not a horizontal line, it's a vertical line. Each level builds on its previous level. Avram Avinu introduced the quality of Ava. When we think of Avram, we think of the man who's standing outside the tent, looking to do kindness with strangers whom he assumes are the idol worshippers of the lowest form, that they worship the dirt on their feet. That's Avram. Comes along Yitzchak, and Yitzchak is, as he is described, Pachad Yitzchak, the reverence and awe of Yitzchak. Yitzchak never leaves the land of Israel. Yitzchak only marries one wife. He doesn't have this sort of swashbuckling life experience that his father or his children have. He's the man of stability. He is the quality of Gevura. So those are those two levels. But then we have a third level, and that's the level called of Yaakov. What is Yaakov? It's his ability to blend the two together. He can be Yaakov and he can be Esau. That's how he becomes ultimately Yisroel. He is what the pasuk says, Yaakov who redeems Avram, because the downside of Ava is that when you need to be Gevura, it's hard. Abraham tried digging the wells and it was not in his skill set. And the characteristic of Yaakov, as we will see, is to have simple compassion. That is when a person is struggling with his Avos Hashem. What can save the day? I don't feel so much love for Hashem that I'm willing to get out of bed on a cold day and go to shul. I don't feel so much love for Hashem that I'm willing to bypass my favorite activity because it's prohibited. What can I do? I can have simple rachmanis on my poor neshama that's stuck in this body that's running to places it doesn't really want to be and dragging it there. That's how the capacity for rachmanis, for simple human compassion, can rescue where ava possibly fails, as we see. Shehi midas harachamim. It's simple to have rachamim, as we will explain. So here the Alter Rebbe throws in another adjective. That is, that we should arouse within ourselves, we should awaken within ourselves a quality called rachamim rabim, translated abundant compassion. It's not just more compassionate, it's not just more compassionate, it's a separate level described as rachamim rabim. What's the difference between rachamim and rachamim rabim? Because rachamim is still limited. How badly do you feel? Well, how sorry a tale can you tell me? You tell me a sorry tale, I feel bad. You tell me a really sorry tale, I feel better. So it's commensurate with my capacity to appreciate the difficulty and the sadness of the circumstance. When I have rachamim rabim, so now it reaches lifnei Hashem. It is completely beyond any limitation. It goes completely outside of I feel bad, I don't feel so bad. And again, we can hear a story that sounds like a terribly sad story, but when you hold it up against some other sad stories, it's pretty pathetic. One of the values in our telling the stories about the suffering of our ancestors. So, as a wise man once said, if Avram Avinu could bring his son up for the slaughter, I could wait till after Havdalah to have a glass of water. Let's not over exaggerate the suffering of our time. So there's a certain limitation. So how badly do I feel for my neshama? It's not such a bad life. I take him to shul a couple of times a week. I feed him mostly kosher food. I don't feel so bad for him. But if I have rachamim rabim, I have abundant rachamim. So now my rachmanis never runs out. I don't say, well, I felt bad enough. I've worked through my guilt. I don't feel so bad anymore. We don't say that. We have limitless rachamim. Al nitzutz elokus, on the divine spark, hamachaya nafshay, that is giving life to my neshama. Now, which aspect of my neshama is this? It is the yechida aspect. It is the absolute oneness of Hashem. Why? Because that's what gives life. Similar to how we spoke about earlier in Tanya, that the what's the word I'm looking for? The awareness that my favorite, the most profoundly important aspect of my existence is that I am alive, and that my aliveness is the product of the infinity of Hashem. So when we're talking here about the Chaya Chaim, about this limit, about the aspect of my neshama that gives me life, we're talking about the very essence of Hashem, because the most profound gift, which is to be alive, comes from the essence and source of Hashem, as the Alter Rebbe nuances it out here. Now we start to feel badly. Now, again, at the risk of sounding a little bit silly, if we found out that somebody doesn't have, a brand new car, and maybe don't feel so badly for him. What if I found out he didn't have, take your pick, indoor plumbing, he didn't have a stove, he didn't have a refrigerator? I might say, oh, wow, that's really serious. Now, Pharaoh didn't have a refrigerator. Napoleon didn't have a shower. But in our society, these are considered basic staples. If a person doesn't have a refrigerator, we consider this person to be impoverished. We're appropriate to have tzedakah. Now, multiply that by the person comes from a lofty level, and now they've been dragged in the mud. So part of the issue is we don't think it's so bad down here. It's not so bad. Why should I feel so badly for him? It's not so bad. It's like the classic thing. I do it. Yeah. So why can't you play the piano? Beethoven does it. Why can't you run faster? This Olympic athlete runs fast. This person, this is a great difficulty. Not only is it a great difficulty because it is objectively sad, that great difficulty is so multiplied by the origin of this lofty neshama that it can't be tolerated, overlooked, how horrific a circumstance it is enduring. That it has been dragged down. Again, we think about this poor neshama that's living up in Shemaim. It's totally one with Hashem. And now it's been dragged down from this loftiest of levels. And it's living in this wonderful place. It's living in a place that is aware of how Hashem fills the world and surrounds the world, and no other matter has any significance to him. So again, it's that much more nuanced. And where is it taken to? And then it is stuck in the snake of a skin, the skin of a snake that is distant from the light of God. Now, skin of a snake sounds gross. It's intended to, but that's not just the most disgusting thing we could think of. It's very specific. So the immediate awareness is the snake is the ultimate symbol of antithesis to godliness. It's the snake in Gan Eden. It's that whole idea that it crawls on the ground. It's that whole idea that it's cold-blooded, that it's so distant from Hashem that the worst punishment that we have meted out is not the death of the snake after the story of the fruit. The snake is not sentenced to death. He's told that he will eat dirt. So the commentaries ask, why is that a curse? That seems to be a blessing, because if you're a snake, what do you spend your day doing? Looking for food. So if I tell you that your food is dirt, you'll never go hungry. So why is this a bad thing? This is a blessing. You don't have to worry about finding food because it's abundant. So we explain that is in fact the curse, because it's like Hashem is saying to the snake, here's your food, here's $10 million, but don't ever call me. I don't want anything to do with you. So we live in a society, a secular society, that if you tell somebody, if your parents said, here's $10 million, but never talk to me again, would you take it? And people say, yeah, oh yeah, that's what I want. But it doesn't turn out so good. It looks like, oh yeah, man, who needs parents? I'll have all the cars and fancy things that I ever want. But it doesn't turn out so good. It's not such a good deal, but it feels like it. So that's the snake. But the Alter Rebbe doesn't say that the neshama is enclosed in the snake. He says the skin of the snake, and that's not just to sound even grosser. The skin of the snake is not like the snake, because the skin of the snake can be transformed into something useful. You can take the snake skin and you can make it into, shoes or boots or bags or whatever it may be. That is, it's more like the klipas noiga. It can be removed from the animal and it can be transformed into something useful. So the snake skin suggests that even though this neshama that was so aligned with the infinity of Hashem has now been dispatched into this gross place, it's not that just there to hold its nose and survive. It's there to thrive, and it is specifically in the skin of the snake that it's going to survive. Now, we know this culturally from our Chabad community. What do? We take the kid in Masifta who lives in this world, where all he's surrounded by is holiness. Everywhere he looks is another firm guy. Everywhere he looks is another guy studying Torah. The value system there is Torah study. The guy who's lauded is the Torah scholar. And we tell him, okay, we grab him by the shoulder. We say, go to LaSalle Street, go to Michigan Avenue, go to a place where there's snakes. People are only interested in the material. All they're being bombarded with constantly is how miserable they are unless they'll buy this, have this, pursue this, all the immodesty. And you'd say they won't go. If they go, they'll be sick, or they'll never come back. They'll say, oh, look at all this. And yet, what do? And this is, again, 50 years ago, more 60 years ago, when the Rebbe talked about this, people said, you can't do this, it's too dangerous. Okay, so 50 years ago, people, it's not unreasonable. And again, without the Rebbe saying it, they don't let these guys cross the street. They don't let them do anything. But they're going to send them to Michigan Avenue, send them to the Northbrook Court in December with all of this klipa going on. Yeah, they're going to. And at first, it is disgusting. It's gross. But they're going to transform it. And they're going to make it into something godly. Well, that's what's going to happen here. So imagine you find this poor neshama wandering around in this disgusting place. absolute distance. I mean, there's nothing in Northbrook Court and Michigan Avenue that looks at all like Mesivta. Their values are not your values. They mock those values. Integrity, scholarship, modesty, kindness. It's made fun of. Not only they don't do it, and they go, wow, but you're such a... They make fun of it. They dismiss the whole thing. You're just a fool. Why aren't you doing that? Come and join us. It's absolute klipa. It's absolutely drowning out and corroding godliness with this thick, crass klipa. That's all it is. It's trying to choke it to death. Ubefrat, and particularly, then, not only is that the natural situation, this doesn't apply to us because we're all perfect, but other people, because she is if we start to think, not only is my poor neshama stuck in my body, and my body, even at its most elemental level, it wants to eat and it wants to sleep and it wants material things, but it doesn't always do good things. So not only is it in a situation that it's unfamiliar with and uncomfortable with and distasteful, it is then compounded by the neshama, by the body further crassening the experience by overeating, not just eating for survival, and all of the other, as the Alter Rebbe say, not good things. Umelech osa berihitim, berihiti moicha ki Yaakov chevel nachalosa. Now, the Alter Rebbe here makes a little bit of a play on a phrase. In Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, it describes this woman who's so beautiful that even the king is captivated by her beautiful hair. That's what it's talking about there. But here the Alter Rebbe says, it's like the king, even the king, the neshama, is captivated by all of this temptation, all of this physical manifestation of beauty and sensual desire and so forth. All of this mishagas, which the Alter Rebbe plays on it, and the word berihitim, which literally means the flowing hair, he translates as berihiti moicha, the flowings of the brain. What are the flowings of the brain? All the mishagas that we think about. All things that the neshama doesn't want to talk about. And anybody who's ever been subjected, which is probably everybody, to being around people who are not trying deliberately to be mean or exclusionary, but that's what they talk about. That's the conversation, whether it's celebrity gossip or it's about Red Lobster or whatever it is that they talk about. And again, if they're being deliberate, that's one thing. But even when they're just being casual in their conversation, that's what they talk about. Those are the things that are important to them. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about this. This isn't what I want to talk about. And the neshama is exposed to this. Ki Yaakov chevel nachalosa. So this term, Yaakov chevel nachalosa, Yaakov is the rope, or literally it's the inheritance of his offspring, but it means it's like a rope. And this is a metaphor that we've had before. And it's the idea that God has tethered himself to us. So if the body is there experiencing all of this mishagas, the neshama is experiencing it too. It's being dragged along. It's like we are carried along with the experiences that are associated with us. As we know, when my daughter was in the Virgin Islands and in a lot of places that you have to show ID and they see Epstein, they give her a third look. No relation, I promise. You get dragged along with that. It's not pleasant, as they say. And that's what's going on with the neshama. And again, this is the analogy that when you tug on a string, whoever's tethered to the string gets tugged along, and God has thrown his lot in with us. Our neshama goes with us wherever we go. This is what it means, that the Shechina is in Galus. The Shechina is imprisoned with the body that drags it along to places it doesn't want to go, like a kid whose mother's taking him shoe shopping. He doesn't want to go there. And yet he's dragged along forcibly, unnaturally. He's being schlepped along. That's not where he wants to be. So we have this rule that that when the Jews were exiled into Babylonia, which also means Bavel, like the word Babel, confusion, Hashem is still with him. So on the one hand, it's very comforting. Hashem is with me even when I'm in all this mishigas. But on the other hand, it's a little embarrassing. Look where I dragged Hashem. So if my father will come and bail me out of prison, it's very loving. But aren't I embarrassed that I dragged him down into prison? Look where I brought him. So this is what's happened. I have to have Rachmanis on my neshama, because look where it's been dragged relative to where it was originally. It was originally up in Shemayim where there was total godly awareness. It was totally in its element, and it got tapped on the shoulder and hit on the head. Go out there and go, go, go. And it winds up in a place where it's totally foreign. It doesn't know the language. It doesn't have those values, and it doesn't even know how to talk to the people, and they think he's weird. I like the analogy. I remember when the kids would come back from overnight camp, so the bus would drop them off on Devon Avenue, and they get off the bus after 3 weeks in overnight camp, and they're jumping around and they're doing all fun, silly things that you do in camp. But it looks weird because you don't do that in the city. You do. So like, this is how the neshama feels. It comes to us, starts talking holiness. It was like, what are you talking about? Well, this is what we talk about in Shemayim. Well, we don't do that here. And the value system gets turned upside down. All the different metaphors about finding yourself in a strange place and being able to maintain what you know to be correct when you're in an environment that's mocking it. Not only doesn't do it, it doesn't revere it. It doesn't say, oh, wow, that's really beautiful. It thinks it's stupid. Why would you do that? That's what's happened. And that's this idea that we're dragging the Shekhinah into Gullus. Used to be when we were in the Beis Hamikdash, we just had to show up and this is it. Now we don't have that place. I mean, hopefully we create those places. We talk about our homes being that safe places, mikdash miyat, those places where we can have that slaked thirst, where it's only godliness. We don't have to have all of this mishagas or davening or whatever it is. Well, Zed Nemar, this is what it means when it says, "V'yoshuv el Hashem v'yirechamehu." Return to Hashem, and He'll have Rachmanis on you. Hashem will have Rachmanis, but we have to return to Pashtav Rachmanis on the neshama. This poor neshama has been schlepped into this place. Later, Rachmim Rabim Al Shem Hashem Hasheicheni Torah, to have again abundant, limitless Rachmanis on Hashem, who dwells with us. Kidichsiv, like it says, Hasheichen Itam Meseich Sumasam. Hashem dwells within us, within our tumah. Hashem dwells within our impurity. So the good news is Hashem is still there, even though I may be tameh. And we shouldn't think, oh, I can't come to shul because this morning I spoke Lashon Hara, or I lost my temper, or whatever it is. Because we might think, well, I've disqualified. I have severed my relationship. So you never sever your relationship. On the other hand, wouldn't it be nice if we could just leave Hashem somewhere where we can always find him, like a pesky little brother, like, don't get lost on me, but don't follow me around because I want to do bad things and I don't want you looking over my shoulder. It's embarrassing. Go away. It's like Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said, they hunted us down to hate us, and the Rebbe hunted us down to love us. What are you coming here for? This is why we moved here, to get away from you. We left Brooklyn because we didn't want you guys telling us to be holy and so forth. We wanted to be pigs, but your neshama is crying out for it. So will you have Pashat Rachmanis? There's a story in Chumash that we're familiar with. We know that Avram negotiated with Hashem to save the people of Sodom and Amor. And he came up with the very logical argument, well, the judge of all the world not act justly if I will find you 50 righteous, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. And he couldn't find 10. So he said, okay, I guess you're right. You have to destroy them. Get the few innocent people, Lot and his family, out. And, we'll live with it. When the angels came to Lot, and they told Lot, go back to Avram. He said, I can't. Do me a favor. There's one of these 5 towns. Remember, there's initially 5 towns. And there was one, it was called Seir, which was a small town. And he says to them, do me a favor and spare Seir. And they say, okay, we'll do it. So they say, isn't this odd? Avram campaigned to save these places. He lost. Lot was victorious, were successful, where Avram failed. Now, Zohar is the name of the place. Now, you may say, well, it was bad because that place needed to be destroyed. It's like a sickness that needed to be cut out. But what we see is that asking for a favor, Rachmanis, can have a greater impact than logic. So Lot, when he said, do me a favor, was successful where Avram was not successful. Why? Because of this power of Rachmanis. This is what the pasuk means when it says, "V'yishak Yaakov l'Rachel." It says that Yaakov kissed Rachel, and he raised his voice and he cried out. Now, he didn't just cry, but he cried out. Vayevik, he cried out, this limitless crying. Like the Alter Rebbe said, Rachamim, Rabim and Rachamon, Rabim and Rachamim, plural, meaning it's unlimited. And Yaakov cried out. Now, this is a little bit backwards. He first kissed her and then he cried out. So we explain. What is this teaching us? Ki Rachel, he knesses Yisrael, makor kol neshamas. Rachel is the source of all neshamas. Even though there's 4 mothers, and even Yaakov had 4 wives, but the primary is Rachel. Now, we find this, curiously, with Rachel in particular. Although, as we talked about, Yaakov is the paradigm of Rachmanis. In a certain way, Rachel is even greater. We know Rachel is not buried in Maras HaMachpelah. She's not buried in Hebron. She's buried in Beis Lachem. Keva Rachel is in Beis Lachem. Why is she buried in Beis Lachem, in Bethlehem, and not in Maras HaMachpelah? So the simple story is because she died while they were traveling, and Yaakov buried her there. But then there's a more profound level, that although she did not have this great zchus to be buried with her husband and her in-laws and her grand-in-laws, and Adam and Chava, this great zchus that Avram wanted Sarah for, but she was buried there because years later there would be a battle of the Jewish people. And as she's described, our mother, Rachel, cries for her people. So this is the ultimate level of Rachmanis. She completely surrenders for all eternity the greatest personal zchus for the benefit of her descendants. This is the ultimate illustration that she is the Knesset Yisrael. She takes the authority, the responsibility for all of Klal Yisrael, and she has the ultimate Mesiras Nefesh, the ultimate sacrifice of anything of self for the benefit of her descendants. So Yaakov connects with her, by Yishak Rachel, he kissed her. They had this close, intimate connection. And then he had this Rachmanis. If we will have that kind of awareness of our neshama, and we will say, I have this neshama, and even though I have not yet developed such an intellectual awareness, again, that I imagine that there's something so much greater than myself that I wish to be connected to, that then drives me to feel this passion and compassion, that then drives me to feel a limitless desire to be connected with the infinity of Hashem, and an absolute distaste from being separated from Hashem. I haven't yet developed that. I haven't yet mastered the long way. But what can I master immediately? Pasha Rachmanis. Would you have Rachmanis? Rabbi Naftali Hershkowitz, a shliach in Des Plaines, tells a story that he was once driving back from New York some years ago, and it's the middle of the night, early morning, and he's on some highway, and he realizes he needs gas. But, he's in rural, this is 25 years ago, there's no GPS, he doesn't know where he is, but he has to get gas. So he gets off at the next exit, and Baruch Hashem, he finds a gas station. The sun's first coming up, and the place is open. So he goes there and he fills up the gas. It's the middle of nowhere in rural Pennsylvania, and there's an attendant there. So he starts talking to the attendant, and as you can imagine, of course, the attendant turns out to be Jewish in the middle of nowhere. So this is total hashgacha pratis. We have to put on tefillin. But the guy, no way, he's not going to put on tefillin. No, every way he tried. Look, it's who would have God devised this plan that I should meet you here at 5 a.m. So he was ready to give up. And he said, look, if I asked you for a cup of coffee, would you give it to me? Oh, sure. So I'm asking you, do me a favor. Oh, do you a favor? Okay, I'll do you a favor. So the Rachmanis quality had a greater impact and all the logical arguments and all the brilliance and all the genius that he could have otherwise devised. This is that quality that Yaakov elevates, as we see. And Yaakov, who is that atzilus level, that is that limitless level of total rachmanis, that is the godly quality of rachmanis. This is the point we talked about before. Not because I like the idea of rachmanis, but Hashem's rachmanis that I am aspiring to. Not I like rachmanis, now will Hashem teach me how to have good rachmanis. That's the difference between the down-up and the up-down mentality. That Chassidus gives us the up-down mentality. This is what Hashem likes. This is Hashem. This is godly rachmanis. Now, I therefore am attracted to rachmanis. Not I like rachmanis. Either side of that rachmanis is useful, is virtuous, is beneficial, and therefore I will now pursue it. Rather, it's this top-down quality. So Yaakov Avinu brings the concept of rachmanis into the world. And then he raises up his voice. It's not just that he screamed. He raises up this level of makar harachamim, and there it is in the plural, suggesting this infinite level. There's always greater. Rachamim, in English, you don't have a plural word for mercifuls. We don't have an adjective for this. It's the idea that it is limitless. So I have compassion. He has compassion. Is there any difference? Yes, because there's limitless compassion. There's limited compassion. Ha'elyonim hanikro, what we call Hashem, Av harachamim umkoirab. Now, we have Av harachamon. You may recognize it. We say it in the davening. Our Father who is compassionate. And then you have Av harachamim, the Father of compassion. That is, one describes the Father, and the other describes the quality, the limitless quality of Rachmanis. Av harachamim is not that the Father is compassionate, but Hashem is the source of compassion. So what is godly compassion? When we model our character of compassion after Hashem. Not we look to Hashem to teach me what I like. But again, like I'm calling it the top-down quality. And this is what Yaakov Avinu does. He reaches to that highest level to bring it into this world. Much like we talked about with Moshe Rabbeinu 2 chapters ago. That he brought the quality of how we can connect what we know to what we feel. The idea of yira intellectually to become yira experientially. Reverence from the concept of it to the emotional enthusiasm and experience of it. In a similar fashion, Yaakov Avinu brings the concept of divine compassion, not just human compassion. You can have human compassion without godliness, but it's still going to be tethered to me because a person cannot get outside of himself. I am compassionate because I think it is a good thing to do, because I would like people to be compassionate to me if I needed it. Because I think it makes the world a better place. It's always going to have that limitation. But by Yaakov raising his voice after he has become connected. So how do we experience this? We follow this model. When we will, like Yaakov kiss Rachel, when we will have that type of intimate awareness of my neshama, well, my neshama will be real to me, then I'll have compassion for it. Just like if I tell you a story, then I see it. Is my neshama real to me? That is my Jewishness real to me, or is it something about me, like I'm left-handed, or my hair color, or where I was born, or some other experiences? When my neshama is truly real, then I can have compassion for it. That's why Yaakov had to kiss her first and then raise his voice. There has to be this intimate closeness with my neshama, then I can have compassion for it. So again, in theory versus when I see it in actuality. This is the point that the Alter Rebbe is making here. Vayev, he cried out, Lo oiro lahamshich misham rachamim rabim, that he cried out to draw down this greater level of rachamim. I'll call hanashamas for every neshama, that every neshama should have the ability to have rachmanis, not because we study the laws of ethics. There's always this presumption that everybody else is just like me, only different. Meaning, everybody knows, fill in the blank, talk about it at a secular level, democracy, fairness, capitalism, eternality. Those are universal values. No, they're not. People in foreign countries don't even speak English. They're so rude. Meaning, we have, not us, of course, we're perfect, but we have this sort of presumption that everything has this innate awareness. And what the Alter Rebbe is telling us is we're trying to have a godly awareness, that our Rahmanis should be driven not by its pragmatism, not by how it makes us better people, but it should be driven exclusively by the godly quality. That's what Yaakov Avinu brings to us. I mean, there's plenty of compassionate people. You don't have to have holiness, Torah, to have compassion. You do have to have Torah to have limitless compassion, godly compassion. Another quick story, another Lubavitch commercial. I heard the story from the man himself. There was a man, he's already passed away. His name was Reb Nosson Vogel. He lived in England. He was in the diamond business. Very, very big Baal Tzedakah, like a Baal Shem Yid. He drove this beat up old car and he was giving away a lot of tzedakah. He has numerous stories with the Rebbe. He had a certain idea. He came up with an idea, nothing new under the sun, that it's always hard for these from Bachrim, when they get married, they have no parnasa. So he came up with an idea. He's going to teach them the art of diamond cutting. Then they'll have a parnasa, and he's going to fund it. Now, apparently, there's only one way to learn how to cut diamonds, and that's to cut diamonds. And it's expensive. It's a very expensive training process. But he was willing to underwrite it to give them the chance for a parnasa. So he wrote to the Rebbe, and he said to the Rebbe that he wants to do it, and he wants to name this school for the Rebbe's father. Now, we know that of all mitzvahs, the Rebbe really had a great appreciation for people who were willing to name things for his father. So the Rebbe wrote him back, and he said he should definitely do it, but he should not name it for the Rebbe's father. Why not? Because what if there'll be somebody who won't want to come because of who it's named for, and then a Jew won't have parnasa? That means the Rebbe is imagining that there's somebody who's so hateful that he will bypass an opportunity for an education so he can support his family because he doesn't like the person who this was named for, which really means he doesn't like the Rebbe. But the Rebbe says, you could say, well, fully on that guy. The Rebbe says, I am willing to bypass the covet so that this person who hates me so much that he will deny himself the opportunity to learn a trade should not miss out on having parnasa. That is divine rachmanis. That's not human compassion. That's divine compassion. Like the person who makes the donation, and we say the donation made by Mr. Johnson, who wishes to remain anonymous. So this idea of divine compassion. So here we go. On the source, who Rachel represents, the source of all the Jewish people, to elevate them out of their exile, where it's been chased away, like the Bacher who's thrown there into the Northbrook court. And it becomes again close with Hashem, as close as the kissing. And again, not this sort of European formal thing where they kiss them on the hand. This deep sense of closeness, this deep sense of oneness. That's what the neshama is missing so deeply. It doesn't want just some patronizing thing. Okay, I'll take you for half an hour. Okay, can we leave already? It wants to have this kind of closeness with Hashem. It means it becomes attached spirit to its spirit. That's what the neshama is craving. Not just some sort of, okay, kid, here you go. I'll take you for half an hour. Don't bother me anymore. I took you to shul this morning. Leave me alone. I'll take you for mincha. In the meantime, I'm going to go to kill or be killed. Like it says, Yashkeni minashikas pihu. He kisses with the kisses of the mouth. That is, this closeness, this intensity is like when a person's mouth speaks the words of Torah. It becomes completely subsumed in the infinity of Hashem. That's what the neshama is looking for, not just some trite thing. Again, pat you on the head, kid, now leave me alone. And I remember I mentioned this before. Again, take it for what it's worth, but a friend of mine who's a Reform rabbi, he says, again, this is his perspective, he says, Reform and Chabad are really after the same thing. How can we make Yiddishkeit relevant to people? So Reform said, we make it easier. It's too hard for people. That's the problem. They're not going to keep kosher. They're not going to keep Shabbos. So tell them they don't have to keep, if the choice is Shabbos or nothing, so let's give them this. That's his perspective. Chabad came along and said, we're going to make it even more challenging. And as he said, Chabad is thriving and Reform is wilting. Meaning, the Rebbe said, people are going to rise to it. They're not looking for an easy way out. They're looking for something meaningful, challenging, at that sort of very elementary level. Come on, let's see if you can keep up. People say, look, this rabbi from Brooklyn, I can keep up with him. They can't. You can't. And then more and more and more. This is what the people respond to. This is what the neshama is craving, not just some sort of trite thing. And it wants to connect his thoughts to the thoughts of Hashem. And his deeds to the deeds of Hashem. That's what mitzvahs are. That's what he's longing for, the neshama. He's not longing, and he's trapped in the snake skin, and he doesn't just want to be placated with a few moments of ceremony. Ubefrat, and particularly Maisa ha-tzedakah, the chesed. Why tzedakah and chesed more than anything else? Because tzedakah and chesed are the manifestations of Rachmanis. What is tzedakah and chesed? It is the ultimate manifestation, as the action item of getting over myself. The concept, and if you've ever encountered someone who has no concept of it, why should I give something that's mine to someone else? This is a little bit we spoke about yesterday in Shul, which is, how did Paro know that Yosef's solution was the solution? I mean, he's got the best PhDs in dream interpretation from the University of Egypt. Why? How does he know that Yosef's suggestion is the best suggestion? And that he should then entrust the whole kingdom to Yosef, a guy who this morning was in the dungeon. Why? So we explain, because Yosef did something that nobody else did. He gave him the answer for free. Remember, the winemaker, last week it tells us he forgot Yosef. Okay, he forgets. Then all of a sudden he remembers Yosef. Why did he remember Yosef all of a sudden this week's parsha? The end of last week's parsha said he forgot him. Why? Because now it benefited him. Now he'd be a hero. He'd get a feather in his cap by coming to Paro and saying, oh, I have the solution. I know the dream interpreter. Meaning, when it wouldn't benefit him, it only possibly benefit Yosef. Then the winemaker didn't remember Yosef. But when it benefited him, he was ready. That's normal. That's how the world operates. Nobody does nothing for nothing. So when Yosef not only interprets Pharaoh's dream, but offers him an unasked for solution about the rationing system, Paro's like, whoa, I never heard of this before. Usually somebody says, this is the problem. You want the answer? This is what it'll cost you. I'll trade you. And he just offers it up for nothing. He doesn't say, oh, and now can you let me out of jail? He doesn't say that. As far as we know, he fully expects to be turned around and sent back to prison. But Paro, to his credit, is appropriately shocked that somebody would just offer up kindness like that. Never heard of such a thing. Because in the world, snakes don't do that. Paro doesn't do that. Egypt doesn't do that. Egypt says, what's in it for me? Why should I help you unless it's going to help me? And that's why tzedakah and chesed are the ultimate liberation of the neshama from a world that's otherwise exclusively driven by what's in it for meanness. The chesed. So now, just like we talked about kissing as a form of closeness, now we talk about hugging as a form of closeness. That the right hand of Hashem is chesed. When we act in godly chesed, not a chesed that, well, I should do it because, I like doing it. It makes me feel good, or it'll benefit me. I'll do you a kindness. You'll do me a kindness. It's not some sort of mercantile relationship. It's a Yosef level. Now, Taka is meaningful to him. It becomes one. Like it says, with my right hand, I embrace you. And how do we have this kind of closeness with Hashem, as close as the illustration of kissing? It's when we speak words of Torah. when not just that we recite it, and not just that we recite it because then I'll pass a test and I'll win a prize, but we submit ourselves to the words of Torah. We allow it to manifest itself through us. This is that kind of gift that we have. When we do this, it will not only be a temporary placeholder until we develop that Avraha thing, the short way, like we talked about the long short way. It's not only that kind of, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, the sort of gimmick to get you going, and I don't mean that to sound derogatory. It's a makeshift way to achieve it, but it does become the method to Avraha, to this overflowing love. When the verse says that Yaakov redeemed Abraham in Yeshaya, so the explanation is, when did Yaakov rescue Avram? So the Gemara says, when Yaakov took responsibility for the tribes, meaning the unique quality of Yaakov is that his kids all stay with the program. You know, Avram had a Yishmael, he left. He had 6 other kids from Keturah, when he remarries Hagar, but he sent them away. Yitzchak had Esav, sent them away. Yaakov finally sort of saved it by saying, you don't have to pick one and lose the others. A more profound, the Medrash's interpretation is that Yaakov's capacity for compassion, which is what allowed all his kids to stay together, it wasn't just luck, even though his kids were very different from one another and they didn't always like each other, as we know, let's face it. Yet Yaakov was able to keep his kids together because of his ability to relate to each one of them individually, which is a form of compassion. It's not just a blind eye of kindness. It's an individualized form of kindness. This is how he, quote, rescues Avram, where until this point, again, it's not a criticism. Each generation is improving on the previous generation. You win some, you lose some. That's how it had been. And Yaakov was the one who all of his offspring stay with the program. And that's the Avraha B'Sgalis Libo that will be revealed, like the Pasuk says, it's in Yeshaya 29:22. Yaakov Asher Podas Avram. Yaakov, who again redeemed Avram. And in our context, what we're saying is that when you don't yet have Avraha, you don't yet have this abundant love or even Yira, what can bail you out? What can work for you? Answer: compassion. When you get human compassion, divine compassion on your neshama that's trapped in your humanity, that will bail you out when your Avraha doesn't work. Similar to how we described that our goal is the long way, develop the intellect to shape the heart to result in change behavior. But in the short term, just be besimcha and override it. That is to appeal right to the emotion. Here again, we have the same idea, even within the character. Until I develop my Ava and my Yira, which again, of Yira first, then Ava. And again, those are dictated, that level of development through the engagement of my Chachma, my willingness to be amazed, to go beyond. Until I have that, I can temporarily, and it's not a makeshift, it's not a Band-Aid. I can hit on the Rahmanis thing, and that will bring me to the revealed abundant love, and it will, in that sense, rescue my neshama from its entrapment within my snake skin. All right.